Hello there, Lizzie here, and today I'm going to show you how to make Maddie. She is our new hat pattern. Well, we had Augie last year, and you know what, we needed a bucket hat. So this time around we've got Maddie, and obviously you've got all the different sections of it, so it's quite well fitted, and actually it's quite a sweet make. So I'm going to put it on. Let's hope that it doesn't mess the hair up too much. So the seam goes at the back, so you can see how it fits nicely there. It's also shaped a little bit as well, so it's shaped around your neck. You can turn it up, you can turn it up if you want to, but if not, you can just leave it as it is. And of course it's fully reversible, so if I can push that all through, and all the seaming details, and you'll see as we go along, all the seaming details are repeated on the lining. So let's just find the back. Now, I don't know if you can see, but there are 3 seams to the brim. So that's the 2 side seams and the back seam. So you know exactly how to put it on, which part goes to the back and which part stays at the front. So reversible, I used a batik. I've kept it quite sort of neutral for this one, but again you could have a look at that. Have I got it on straight? I feel my seam. Yeah, I have. Looks a bit quirky now, doesn't it? There we go. And I think it's rather cute, and it fits like a dream. Now I have taken the liberty of giving you suggestions of, let's just tidy this up a little bit, of suggestions of what percentage on your photocopier, on your printer that you need to alter to create different sizes, and it's an approximate. Okay, it's an approximate. So what I suggest you do is look at roughly what I'm telling you to reduce your printer size to. So for instance, this is 100%, because I have to make it for me, otherwise I don't know how it's going to look when it's done. And so if you wanted it smaller, then it'll tell you in the pattern what you need to adjust your printer to. So maybe 94%, 92%, 96%, and it will reduce it in size accordingly. And we're giving you the approximate circumference of it, which hopefully will help you make different sizes. What I suggest you do is measure the head of the person that you're going to make it for, and that is the circumference, and then look at what we've suggested and then give it a try. I would also make up a bit of a toile. So in other words, you're making up a sample, and I would just do the side and the brim. So the brim, do you know what they call it? All different things, but they call this the brim. This is the top. But anyway, that's what you're making to create like the shape that would fit on your head. So that's what I suggest you do. Anyway, this is Maddie, and it's one of our lovely new patterns, and isn't she gorgeous? I'm going to turn her through to the linen size. I've used linen. I love linen. Really, really lovely fabric to work with, and you'll see that she sits really beautifully and sturdy, and it's a great pattern. And actually I think it's quite unisex as well. I think the boys will like this as well as the girls. I don't think it's particularly feminine looking. You decide. So I will put Maddie over here somewhere so she's out of the way. Okay, so you'll have all the pieces. Now all of the pieces for the main hat, well, inside and outer and lining, you can get out of a fat quarter, but you need to lay your pieces out. Now what I suggest you do, and I've mentioned this in the pattern, is that where you've got a piece that says cut on the fold, I would print 2 of those out and join them together, so you've got an actual piece, and that will help you place those down on your fat quarter. I have given you a picture of what it looks like on a fat quarter, but I think I would prefer you to actually print twice and join those pieces together. That's just my tip to you. The other thing to remember is the back piece. So in other words, the brim that's in 2 pieces, so this piece and that piece, just make sure you're putting them right sides together, so your fabric is right sides together before you cut these out. If you lay those pieces down onto your fabric as the pattern, you're going to get 2 right sides or 2 left sides. The alternative is that you cut one, flip it, and then cut another. It's just a top tip so you don't waste any fabric, because there'll hardly be any left when you've cut it out of a fat quarter. So that's the housework done, if you like. So let's crack on and make it. So this time I'm using a pink linen, which matches my top, I have to say. And I'm putting a little bit of kaif inside. So we'll make up the pieces individually as we go along. So you've got the top like that. Now, what I do suggest you do, a little bit more homework, is that you notch out where the sides are, where the top and bottom is of at least the top. And then on the brim, you need to mark the centre back pieces. This is just my top tip. And also mark that these pieces join to A. So I don't know if you can see, we've got A written down there. So you know those are the pieces that join together. With the other piece of brim, I've measured the centre. I don't know if you can see the little white marks. And do it on the wrong side, because that's where you're going to be stitching, otherwise you won't see it. So I've marked the centre of the brim there. And the actual what I call the brim, I call it the stand. There's so many different terminologies for this. The side bit that goes around your head here, the side panels. I've also marked top and bottom right in the centre. Can you see the marks here and here? So I can line it up beautifully with the top here, and also the centre. Not that that's desperately important, but I think transferring those markings will be invaluable to you as you go along. So let's get started. Let's bring the machine. I want my little mat out because there's an awful lot of decorative stitching with this, a lot of decorative top stitching. And I think that for me, that was really one of those essential pieces that I needed to do. So we've got the top. So we're now going to do the crown that goes around the actual, the top. We're going to do right sides together. So you've got two pieces. Now you will be able to identify these from the other pieces because they all look quite similar, because these are fatter. These are much deeper because it's got to fit your head. So you can see just by me doing that, you can see that that is the height of my head. Listen, if yours is different, then please alter the pattern as you go. Now, the other thing with this, which is unusual for me, is I've given it all a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Normally I'll do a 1/4 inch. And if you're not sure about using a 1/2 inch, because we don't normally do that, get your ruler, get your pen, and draw a couple of lines. You wouldn't need to do this very often because you'll soon get used to that 1/2 inch. But it's always worth just putting your ruler on there, drawing a line with a heat erasable pen or a pencil, you won't see it, and you'll see that I've got a nice line there. Now look, if you see that this has got a white backing to it, every single piece has been stabilised with a cotton iron-on interfacing. And for the Visaline, it's G700 off the top of my head. But it's a nice, it's kind of not, it's not quite lightweight, but it's got a little bit of substance which will help no end how your hat will look and how it will behave. Because you can see it stands up quite nicely, it doesn't flop over, which is you know, that's something that you really want to sort of aim for, really. So I'm not going to draw again because I kind of know that this is a 1/2 inch, but do measure. So we're not doing a 1/4 inch, we're doing 1/2 inch. Now each time we do a seam, I'd like you to press that open, and I'll get my iron and my mat in. So let's just get all of these bits and bobs out of the way, make a bit of room. And I just want you to iron those seams open because we're going to top stitch down the sides of those seams. So let me just open that up again. You can see on the side view, all I'm doing is opening up that seam and really telling it who's boss. So I'll leave my iron on because I know I'll need it as I go along. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to, on the right side, I'm just going to follow my seams down with a top stitch. So if you want to lengthen your stitch because it's purely decorative, or leave it at, well, I've got it on about 2.4, so you can leave it on that. And just take your time. Again, if you do want to draw a line, then by all means draw a line. So I'm just going from one side to the other. And just make sure those seams stay open. And we'll just trim as we go. Maddie is hiding my scissors. So I've gone down one side of the seam and now I'm coming down the other side. And it really adds to the professionalism of your project. Now, it's not very often I use this cotton interfacing, but for this sort of project, it's absolutely ideal. And there's lots of applications that this interfacing stabilizer can be used for. And as usual, as time goes on, we'll cover most of them. So there is the crown, which is just the side bits. What should we call it? Just the side bits. That would be much easier. Now the seams for these go at the side. Now the actual top itself is a little bit like an oval. It's not round, it's like an oval. It kind of mimics the shape of the head. So we've got notches here. We've either got notches or we've marked it on the fabric, the east, west, north, south. So I want to make sure my side seams go exactly where that mark is. So one side seam there, one side seam there, because they're on the side of the head, and then front back. Doesn't matter at this stage about front back, but you've got those markers should you need. Now, of course, the ideal situation now is to first of all line up your first lot of notches. Let's just get that one because I think I've ironed the other one out. And put right sides together, and you're putting the shorter, so the band itself that goes around the crown is shorter on the top and it sort of slants out, so it's the top. If you're not sure, check your pattern, because the pattern piece tells you that to join to the actual top of the hat. So again, we'll just line up those sides. Where am I? Oh, didn't do. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. No, I didn't. I'm thinking, did I get that right? No, I didn't. So I'm lining up the seams with the side of the top of the hat. I keep saying top hat. It sounds like we're making a top hat. So again, just bringing up my notch to that side seam. It doesn't matter if you're out a mil or two, but it's nice to get it right. And then at the when we put our sides together like that, so our seams are together like that, okay, so they're back and front, we just want to mark these ends here. So this is the center. In fact, there is a little mark there already, so it's just making sure that you've marked it. And then you're going to join the mark on this top to the brim. So let's just clip that together. And really, for me, that's all I'll do. I just want to make sure that those particular parts of the pattern meet. The rest I can ease in. Now, what you can do as you go along is that you can snip into your crown to make sure it fits nicely onto the circle, onto the top. Now, because we've got a 1/2 inch seam allowance, you can clip in 1/4 inch quite easily. Usually we kind of like do it about 1/8 inch if we're going to do a bag, but this time we're just doing a snipping of about 1/4 inch, and it just eases the brim, sorry, the crown around the top of the hat. I shall get the right terminology by the end. The thing is, I've been calling all of the parts different to other folk, and look, I'm not a milliner, so you got to get it right. But the patterns will be written correctly. It's just me not getting it right. So I've snipped all the way around, which means it's going to be so much easier for me to stitch now. So under the needle, again, we're doing a 1/2 inch seam allowance, little back stitch, take my first clip out. I'm looking at where I'm going, so if you can see, I'm looking where I'm going here. You can see it probably better on the side view if I just move that around a little bit. So that's my starting point at the side seam, and then I've clipped all the way around, and there's a good picture of that in the pattern, and that's my next marker. So I'm going to aim for around there and make sure all of that fits in beautifully as I go around. So I'll just bring it so it's more comfortable for me. So what we're doing is we're stitching the straight edge, if you like, to the curve. I find that a much better way of fitting projects together. So bearing in mind where I want this all to meet, and just make sure that your raw edges do meet. If they don't, it'll put the whole measurements out of kilter. So just try and get those raw edges to meet, yeah. And just work your way around. Take your time. You can see I'm only doing 1 inch at a time, adjusting my fabric, fitting my 2 pieces together, and just following around. So I'm coming now round to the side, the other side. So I take my next clip out, and then just gently work our way around. Now we repeat this process with the lining, but I'll do that with you today. I haven't pre-made anything. It's such a lovely make. I'm quite enjoying putting this together. I'm certainly enjoying the colours. I chose them especially to go on my holidays. So looking forward to wearing it on the holiday. So, and be careful you don't stretch anything. I mean, you shouldn't do, because you've got stabiliser on every piece. So you shouldn't stretch it, but just be wary of that as well. And just take your time, manoeuvre all the fabric, make sure those raw edges sit together so you're not cutting any corners, and you're keeping the curves. You don't want a clunky hat. Okay, we're back to where we started. How lovely. And it fits like a dream. So what we need to do now is that top stitching again. Do you remember we did top stitching on the side seams? Now we're going to do top stitching around the crown. Now we're not stitching on the oval, we're stitching on the side panel, okay? So just remember that, and look at the pattern, look at the photographs, and you'll see that we're stitching on the side, on this piece of fabric, not that, okay? It'd be easy to get that wrong. So I'm popping it under the machine. Ideally you might want to press this at this point. All I'm going to do is push my seams out, and all I'm doing as I'm going along, maybe it's easier to see on the side, and I'll do it at a funny angle so you can see. So this is my top bit, my oval. This is my side, this is the crown, and I'm just pulling those seams apart. Can you see? And then I'm just going to stitch around, and just take your time with this, because once again I'm going to turn it now so it's more comfortable for me. This is all going to be on show, so please take your time. Your top stitching should be no more than 1/8 of an inch, so please practice, and it'll look amazing. I showed this to somebody a little while back, and the one that I made, Maddie, the first one, and their reaction was, oh my goodness, it looks so professional. And that's because of all the top stitching. Now, as usual, I'm only using cream thread. Look, always cream thread. But of course you can match your threads. It could have been a lovely pale pink. But actually, I think keeping the neutral shades always work for me. So we're just coming round. So we will be doing this all again with the lining. And coming back. Now I'm not back tacking at all, it's only a top stitch. I want it to be neat and tidy, so I haven't back stitched at all. One little thread to cut. So you can see, and I'll take it to the side so you can see that that's what it looks like. Okay, so you can see the double stitching down here, and you can see the stitching around the top of the crown as well. So there's no stitching on this part at all. So now we need to attach the brim, I know that's what it's called, around the outside. So the first thing we need to do is to stitch that centre back seam. So don't forget, if you're not sure, because it does make a difference, because this is definitely shaped to sit into the back of your neck and not kick out. So it's only a little bit, but it does make a difference. So that centre back seam is quite important that you put those two together. So 1/2 inch seam allowance. And what we'll do straight away is the top stitching, so that's out of the way. So this time I'm just going to finger press that open, but I would like you to iron it just to make sure that it's sitting flat. So we'll top stitch. That's it. Need to move my machine foot. It's slid across my floor. And now I've come down the other side. Let me show you that in the side view. That little thread there. You can see what that looks like. Okay, lovely and neat, really beautiful. So now we need to stitch together the A seams, and it says quite clearly on the pattern what is the A seam and where it joins together. So again, refer to your pattern piece, don't guess, just refer to it, take your time. 1/2 inch seam allowance, and while we're here we'll open that seam up, make it nice and flat. So just finger press that open like that, and we're going down each side of that seam. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but it's one of those things, if I only say it once you might miss it, and then you'll think, oh hold on, when did she say that? She never said that. I missed it. So if I say it a few times, one of those times you'll catch it. So I'll just trim my threads off so that it looks fairly neat. Let's get that one as well. So there's two pieces put together. You can see what that looks like. So now we're putting right sides together on the last side piece. And of course these actually match up to the side pieces on the brim. No, the stand. The crown. I'm just going to say the side from now on. Sticky out bit, side bit, top bit. That'll do. Right. Oh dear. So I'm going just down those last side seams with my top stitch again. Again, 1/8 of an inch. Okay, not 1/4 of an inch, not 3/8 of an inch, an 1/8 of an inch. Okay, it really makes a difference. It really does a lovely, neat job. So there is the brim stitched together. So now we want to stitch this shorter edge, because if we do it like that, you'll see that you've got the inside shorter edge, and then this is the outside. This is the bit that sits obviously on the outside of the brim. So you now want to attach that to the hat top. And actually, while we're there, if you want to make up a toile, in other words, a sample, see if it'll fit you, just do this part. Just do this part in some scrap fabric, some old sheeting, something you're going to throw away that you're not going to use, that sort of thing. And put this part together and fit that onto your head. Don't forget you will lose 1/2 an inch on the length of it, so don't think, oh gosh, that's come over my ears. That'll never do. Well, you still need to take some off for the seam allowance here, but generally you'll see whether it's going to fit you or not. So now we've got the two side seams, so you've got a seam here and you've got a seam there, and those are your side seams. So you want to marry up 2 of those, and then the back seam, the centre back seam that I told you about, you need to make sure is correct. That obviously goes at the back. So let's have a think. So right sides together. So I'm holding on to that centre back seam and I'm putting a clip in, and I know that one's perfect. So right sides together, let's just flip all this through. Here we go. I'm going to get so many people telling me what the correct terminology is of hat parts. I can feel it coming my way. Oh dear. So now I'm matching up the side seams of the brim to the side seams of the crown. Okay, I've matched those up, and then there's the back seam there. Okay, so you can see what that looks like. And if you want to pop another clip here, I've got the places marked. You can mark them with a pen or mark them and cut a notch out. You've got the notches on the pattern, so you might do that. And don't forget, you've got a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so there's plenty of room to snip a little triangle out. So those are now in situ. So now all I'm going to do is stitch around and stitch the 2 pieces together. So take the first clip out, make sure that your side seams are pretty lined up, and make sure that they sit nicely together, because you will notice that they're not quite lined up. Probably won't annoy you, but you'd like it to be perfect. So now we'll just whiz around. Now, because these aren't straight edges as such, they go together quite differently to the crown and the top. They really do. It's quite surprising. It's almost like stitching 2 straight seams, 2 straight edges together. It's a little bit of curve, obviously, but so let's get that lined up. But if you want to snip in, you snip in. That's absolutely fine. Nobody's going to judge you. So just match up those seams again, just making sure they fit. Keep all your clips in and pins in till the last minute, and just make your way round. Adjust if you need to. It's gone quiet, I'm concentrating. Yeah, and so I made this out of linen because I thought I wanted to be quite traditional. But then I thought, you know what, I'd love the pop of colour with some kaif. So we've come right back to the beginning. A little back stitch just to hold all those pieces together. And that is basically the hat made, but we've got to do the lining. So we're going to repeat everything again. So if you want to switch off and off now and fast forward to the end, please do. But I'm going to take you all the way through. So what you'll see is, hopefully you'll see, you've got, let's get it so it's the right way round for you. Yeah, so there's the centre back, which is slightly shaped. You hardly notice it, but there's about probably just a little bit over 1/4 inch hacked off here, drawn off when I drew it, so it sits more into the nape of the neck. And then you've got the side seams here, and then you've obviously got the front there, which is nice and clean looking. So don't forget to do that top stitching, and we'll match the top of this side panel here, and we will stitch on the side panel, because when we put the 2 pieces together with the lining, we stitch the brim then, which is fine. So all the way around, just pull those seams apart so you've got no puckering or folding over of your fabrics. You could have pressed this as well. So all of the seam allowance, the 1/2 inch seam allowance that I've stitched, is underneath my top stitching. I'll show you when I've done, just to make sure you know how that works. And I'm folding it under with my my thumb and finger so I know it's going underneath. If you're not sure, you can feel it. So again, 1/8 of an inch. Make it nice and neat. And those seams, those side seams are sitting beautifully together. Now, none of this fabric has been washed. What I do suggest you do is wash your fabric. It's not very often you'll hear me say that, but we're kind of making a garment and you want it to fit before you wash your fabric and after you've washed your fabric. So please wash your fabric before you start cutting out. So hopefully you're watching this first before you make it up. But I'm sure most of you will know. So that's the hat done. So let's crack on and do the lining, which is just too gorgeous for words. So again, a 1/2 inch seam allowance with the lining too. And we're going to do the same again that we did before. We're going to do that top stitching. And now you may not want to, you may decide that that's just too much for you to do. But it means that when you turn it through, it'll look just as professional on the inside, or what was the lining, to the linen side, if that's what you're going to use. So just open up those seams, do press it, and then again we're using 1/8 of an inch, probably even less than that to be honest, but 1/8 of an inch is about your guide. And again, I'm still using my cream thread. You might want to use now, definitely you might want to use a contrasting thread, maybe a pink or a purple. Oh, too delicious. But for demonstration purposes, I don't want to keep changing my thread. Let's just make it. And it's lovely. Yeah, so that's our crown done. So that's the bit that's going to go around the side. So now we've got to do is attach it to the top. So let's just get our threads out of the way. So we know that those seams, can you see the seam here at the back? Those two seams sit at the side of the head. And the side of the head, in this case, look at that fabric. It's an oval and the sides are here and here. Okay, that's the sides. The top and bottom of the oval is back and front. Okay, it is all marked on the pattern, and there's a lot of information on the pattern this time to make sure that you put it together, you construct it properly. And again, side seam to the side, and the oval top and bottom is front and back. So let's get those lined up. So you can see it's quite an easy make, really. It's the shaping of it that makes it special. So again, we'll just get those notches together. Make sure we've got the oval sitting in the right place. When you look at it, you can see pretty much that it is an oval. And again, we're going to do 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now, this is the lining, so we could clip it. It's all stabilised, so it doesn't have the flexibility, if you like, or versatility of a bias stretch, because most of these pieces are bias. And on the patterns, again, it actually gives you a direction to lay your pieces down so they're going on the straight of grain, but which helps, you know, keeps its shape and all that sort of thing. But by the time we've stabilised, it doesn't make huge difference. So again, try and keep your raw edges together. It's easier with the cutouts, I must admit. But we'll just crack on and get this done. Oh, hi there. Thank you for stopping by. I was going to talk to you about the Gold Club actually, and I'm preparing for our Facebook Live tonight because every week on Facebook in the Gold Sewing group, we actually do other things like free motion embroidery tonight. So the Gold Online Sewing Group, what is all that about? Well, if you go to my website, lizziecurtis.com, you'll see the sign up tab. Click on that, you get a choice of membership, but what you do get every month is 2 different super patterns, especially for you. And do you know what? When they go in the shop the next month, they're $4.99 each. So this is an absolute bargain for £5, about $6.20, something like that. You're getting those 2 full patterns with video tutorials as well. So why don't you join up today and join the online sewing group, which is known as the Gold Sewing Group. I'll see you there. Bye. If you do end up with a pucker because you haven't clipped, undo it and make sure that it's laying flat. It will go flat. This has been measured within an inch of its life. And like I say, clipping it really does help. So, let's just go round. This Kaffe is just too delicious. I didn't used to like Kaffe. I don't know why. I can't put my finger on it why I didn't like it. It's not that I didn't like it, it just didn't appeal to me. Although I love bright colours. So I can't answer that why. But now, yeah, I quite like it. I like the clashing colours. I like the pinks with the oranges and the reds thrown in. I love all that. So here we go, we're coming back to the beginning. That's it, super. So once again we're going to top stitch around the crown, the top of the crown, which is the side panels. So we're not stitching on the oval, we're stitching on the side panels. So start from a seam. Oh, I was going to show you how the seams look inside. I'll do that. So again, just go round. There's actually one seam in this hat that isn't top stitched. Now in the pattern I've suggested that you can, and the reason for that is it's the seam that we're going to turn the hat through at the end. And it's possible to do the top stitching, but by golly, you've got to have it absolutely spot on because you're going to see it through both layers and you won't be able to see very easily where you're stitching. Now the only suggestion I've got for that is to hand baste it. I know, don't cry, but you could do that. You could absolutely do that. So hand baste it, get it absolutely spot on, and then pop it under the machine. You'll be so proud of yourself. Right, back to where we started. That's lovely. So we've got the crown of the hat put together. Just need to trim my threads. And again, I haven't backstitched. All I've done is go over my first couple of stitches. If I show you that on the side camera, you'll be able to see what that looks like. Oops, if I can hold it still and get the light on it. There we go. So you can see what that looks like. So we've stitched on along that seam there. Okay. So we're going to put that to one side just for a moment because what I want to do now is to make the brim pieces up for the lining, and then we're going to stitch that onto the main hat. We're not going to stitch it to what we've just done. So right sides together. Oh, we've got to do that centre back seam. Let's not forget that. That would be a little awkward. So again, we're going to open that seam up. Whoops, and we're going to top stitch. There we go. And finger press it or get the iron on it. I really would prefer, if I was just stitching here on my own, I would be pressing this beautifully. So please, stop the video and go and press your seams. So now we're going to stitch the two together. So you've got your front part of the brim that sits just there, and then you've got the back parts. So obviously they need to go together, right sides together. 1/2 inch seam allowance. Open up the seam. So a lot of it's repetition, and it's also a lot of extra work, which you might think, oh yeah, but I'm not sure, it's only pretty, it's not structural, it's not holding the hat together. But if you look at some of the bucket hats that you can buy, they have a lot of seam detail. That's part of the design, I suppose, of the feature of the pattern. So I thought, well, we should replicate that because we're as good as them, if not better, because you've chosen the fabrics and you have stitched this. So you can see it doesn't really take long. I know my machine's a bit whizzy, but even on your domestic machine, it won't take you long. I'm not going that whizzy. Okay. And also, as I said before, and I'll say it again, you'll notice that all of the pieces that I'm stitching, and that's all of them, have been stabilised with an iron-on cotton interfacing. And with Fieseline, it's G700. If you know what that is, then maybe you could get some to test out if you like. If you're in the States, then I'm sure you know what your equivalent is. Right, so we've made the brim of the lining. So now I want to stitch that to my hat. So I'll bring my hat in here, and I want to stitch that to the hat. And you might think, well, that's a bit odd, but it helps because we're going to actually do the turning gap through this part that goes around here. It's just a neater job. So find your back seam on the bag, and get those two together so you know that's going to be perfect. Slip your hat through the centre of that. Get your side seams together. Whoops. And then you can match up the notches on the front, centre front. And by doing it this way, it makes sure that it's all perfectly, that brim is beautiful and neat without it. If you put the turning gap in the brim, gosh, you might really notice it. So let's keep it as neat as we can. So there we are. So I've now matched up all the 4 parts, if you like, north, south, east, west. Let's find the back. Make sure we've got that in the right place. So that's the back there, 2 side seams, and that's the front. And I've just popped them together, and that's you can see that's the brim of the lining. So we'll just run that under the machine. Make sure those seams stay beautifully together. You won't notice so much on the brim. So they should sit together so beautifully. One thing I was going to suggest, because this is a garment and it needs to be, I'm just going to switch that off, you can hear it clicking. It needs to be cut pretty well, is look out for a pattern spray, a paper pattern spray. Now I know that OTIF, I'm pretty sure OTIF makes it, but I'm sure there's lots on the market, but it's a paper pattern spray. Oh, I've just caught my seam there. And you spray it on the back of a pattern piece or the front, especially if you're going to flip it. And it actually, it's like a glue, but it doesn't affect your fabric at all. And when you iron the pattern piece down, the whole pattern piece is stuck to your fabric. It's amazing, which means you can cut really accurately, and also you could cut with smaller scissors if you want to, or a rotary cutter, but it's worth looking out for it. And I used it on my pattern pieces. So around the back, just move that brim slightly because it's just shifted. All the way around. Super. Now if you want to, you can clip that. And I meant to say to you about showing you how my seams lie. I don't know if you can see them, but they're lying really flat inside there. And you see them okay. So that when you stitch do the top stitching, you're almost making those seams lie flat. So bring your lining brim out. So it's showing. There we go. Looks a bit odd now, doesn't it? And what we need to do now is I would actually give this a bit of a press, I'll be honest with you, just to make sure those curves are beautiful. And we're going to top stitch again around the brim. Okay, so I'm not going to iron because, as you know, we're always up against the clock. So I'm pushing my first piece out so it's gorgeous, and then I'm going to top stitch. I always start from a seam, so those side seams that we've used, I always start from there. Now I'm going to put my hand inside the brim and I'm going to push that seam out as I go. I don't want you to do that unless you're very confident. I want you to press it, or even tack it, baste it. But I'm just making sure that that seam is pushed out so it's nicely curved. So we'll just work our way around. And you might find as you go over those side seams that they are a little bit, you'll hear your machine clunk its way through, maybe. You'll feel the thickness, but it should take it okay. If you do hit a seam that causes you a problem, don't forget about using the seam jumper, the little gadget. I'm not sure I could grab mine. Some machines it comes in the toolkit, but it allows you to jump over a deep or high seam. Great for jeans and things like that. So I'm just pushing that seam out, as I said, finger pressing as I go. I want it to be beautiful. I'm wearing this on my holiday, guys, so I want it to be nice. And I will just repeat this again, is before you cut your fabric out, please wash it. It shouldn't shrink by a huge amount. It shouldn't. But there is that chance it might, and spoil your whole make. We might have to give it away to somebody else with a smaller head. That won't do. So, coming back to where we started, don't do a back stitch, it's only a top stitch. But what we will do is neaten off the threads, just to make sure they look beautiful. Okay. Just trim a little bit here, and we're done. So now we have top stitched all the way around the brim. Isn't it looking lovely? But it looks a bit odd there, doesn't it? So we've got to now join the brim to the crown of the hat, okay? So, and we need to remember to leave a turning gap. Now, I have left my turning gap between the side seam and the back center seam, okay? I've left that whole piece open. And then all I'm going to do at the end is just hand stitch it closed. So I'm going to stitch 3/4 all the way round. And then I'm just going to leave that section from the center back here to the side seam here open. So just make sure you get all of your seams in the right place. So that's my front, that's my back, that's my sides. So I need to do the same with this. Well, it's just the side seams I have to match up. So right sides together. Let's think about this. There we go. Right sides together. I'll put a clip in there. And then I don't want to push it that way. I want to push it the other way. Just let me have a think about it. Let's turn that the other way around. That's it. So we've turned our outer hat inside out. That's much better. I'm thinking, how am I going to get all that in that little piece there? No. So line up your centre back seam. So we've turned it through. So our outer fabric is now inside out. And we're just going to line up our side seams with the side seams of the brim. And again, check your pattern at all times. Just check your pattern if you're not sure, because all the words sound the same, don't they? They all sound the same. So side seams are now clipped together. So now all I need to do is where we've marked or cut a notch, join those together. So I've got a mark rather than a notch on mine, but you please yourself. They're there for you to use. And then the centre back, we've got that centre back seam, and I've got a little notch this side or a mark to line that up. So I know that it's evenly distributed all the way around. Let's just cut that. So we do need to remember to leave that turning gap. So what I'll do is I'll start from the centre back and I'll go round to the furthest away side seam. So I'm going from the centre back to the side seam, round the front to the second side seam. I'm stopping there. So now we're joining all of those pieces together. Now this is the only seam, as I said, that you probably won't want to top stitch. I'll show you what I'm talking about when we get to that bit, and then you can decide. But what you need is accuracy, because one side you'll see top stitching beautifully, the other side you're stitching blind. It's a bit like when you put a binding on a quilt. It's got to be positioned so accurately to get the stitching in exactly the right place. So sometimes it's better not to do it, and it's not detrimental to the hat. So I'm just coming around to the front now, just making sure my seams are going together, taking out my clip and just working my way around. Again, I'll only do a couple of inches at a time, just to make sure everything is lined up, readjust. And because although most of these pieces are cut on the bias, but we've stabilised them, nothing is stretching or moving. It's marvellous. So I'm coming up to that second side seam now. So I'm doing myself a nice back stitch and I'm stopping right there. Okay, let's move the machine. So we've got our turning gap just here. Look, looks a bit odd, doesn't it? I must admit, it looks a bit odd. So there's your turning gap there. So let's just pull it all through. And surprisingly, it doesn't get that crinkled, and I think that's because of the stabiliser. But I think maybe you'll want to steam it. You probably can't iron most of it, but maybe a steam would benefit from. Right, so you can see now how the lining, it looks like a super cake, doesn't it? How the lining is separate, if you like, from the hat itself. And that's where top stitching those two layers of fabric together would help that lining stay put, if you like. So there we are. So there's our hat. Give it a little punch. It'll need an iron, as all these things do. And let's just push that lining in. Because we've top stitched, all the seams are beautiful. Obviously where I haven't top stitched, as you know, we've talked about that, you want to make sure that you give that an iron. So if I show you that, the inside, you can see this seam here is the one we've just done. It's not top stitch that I've done. You may well do. That needs an iron. Okay, if we look at the original one, you can see how that looks. It lays very flat. So we want to do the same with that. But what you have got, obviously, is this turning gap. And we need to close that. Now, let's have a look, see if you can see. There we go, that's much better. So because this is a reversible hat, I don't want you to pinch those seams together and top stitch. I want you to hand stitch. So I just want you to do, you could do a ladder stitch, that would be nice, or just a simple slip stitch is fine, as long as the stitches are small, and this is the only time I'd probably get some pink thread out to make sure it matches. But those need to be brought together. Let me show you on the side camera. Let's make sure this is out of the way. So I would want you to bend this over, fold this over by a ½ inch, and just follow the shape of your hat around. Okay, can you see that? Well, hopefully you can. You can't answer me, but hopefully you can. And then you're just going to hand stitch that beautifully. I hope you can see it. And it's only a little bit you're doing. It's only from that seam to that seam, so it's not a massive amount, but it will make a huge difference to how the hat looks. And if we turn it through, this is obviously, as I said, reversible. Let's pretend we've stitched that. Don't forget which is your back seam and which is your... So the two side seams go to the side, the centre back goes to the centre back. Let's have a look. Very nice. Very nice indeed. So there we are. So there is the Kaffe version of the bucket hat called Maddie. I think it's quite cute, isn't it? I think it's got a completely different shape to Augie, which I like. A lot of people asked me for a bucket hat. So let's see what it looks like with the linen that matches my top. So again, need a bit of a steam. So find that centre back. It's actually quite useful because you know how it's going to go onto your hair. So just grab the centre back and pop it on. There we go. I have to get it straight. There we go. Nice. I feel that it's at a quirky angle, maybe because it needs a press. So that kind of matches the top. Maybe that's what I should just always wear on my holidays. So this is Maddie. This is our beautiful bucket hat with the posh lining in this case and the bit of batik in that case. And I've made her out of linen. If you use thicker fabric, so you might want to use a tweed, maybe upsize it a little bit because you've got all that bulk that needs to be addressed in the seams. It's going to add to the thickness and it's going to make it a smaller hat just by a smidge, but that might be really important. So just up it just a little bit. You could make it in like a PVC fabric, a waterproof fabric, or you could make it in your regular fabric like this and use some waterproof covering like an Eau de Coat. But you can also get an iron-on vinyl that you could treat your whole fabric before you cut it out with an iron-on vinyl, and then you can make it waterproof if you want to. I think it's rather cute. I'm loving it. I need to get my hair a little bit straighter, I think. Yeah, anyway. So this is Maddie. This is one of our new patterns, and I hope you make loads.